December 4, 1872. The morning fog over the Atlantic clung to the deck of the de Grasse like seawater-soaked wool. Salty wind carried fine droplets that stung Ellis Croft's cheeks, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the brass railings 300 yards away. The brigantine Mary Celeste drifted in an eerie arc, her mainsail half furled like a seabird with a broken right wing. The crow's nest stood empty, not even a ship's flag fluttering where it should have been. "First mate, something's wrong with that ship, look out!" Joey's voice cut through the fog, trembling almost imperceptibly. "I've been watching her for half an hour, no one's moving, not even the rigging." Ellis narrowed his eyes and pulled a brass monocular from his pocket. Through the lens, the Mary Celeste came into sharp focus, her teak deck glowed dark brown from seawater immersion, her brass bell polished to a shine, the inscription 1860 still legible on its surface. A 12-year-old ship, supposedly in her prime. He lowered the monocular and turned to Captain Lemaire at his side. "Captain, I request permission to lead a small party aboard to investigate. From the ship's condition, it doesn't look like she's been hit by a storm or pirates. It's more like, she was abandoned suddenly." Captain Lemaire stroked his beard, his gaze grave. "Take 3 men, arm yourselves, and stay alert. If you spot danger, return at once." The sea was unnaturally calm as the dinghy rowed toward the Mary Celeste, even the waves seeming listless. Ellis sat at the bow, his fingers unconsciously brushing the dagger at his waist. 15 years at sea had shown him ships torn apart by storms, vessels bloodied by pirate raids, but never one so intact. She looked like a carefully arranged model, even the barrels on her deck lined up perfectly. When the hook caught the ship's rail, Ellis was the first to climb the rope ladder onto the deck. The moment his boots touched the teak, he was enveloped in a heavy, frozen silence. No creak of rigging against pulleys, no crewman coughing, not even the echo of waves lapping the hull empty, as if all sound had been sucked out of the ship. "Is anyone here?" his crewman Peter called out. His voice bounced off the masts, returning as a faint, hollow whisper, swallowed by the fog. Ellis signaled for the men to split up, Peter to check the cargo hold, Thomas the crew's quarters, and himself to the captain's cabin. The cabin door stood ajar, a sliver of morning light seeping through. When he pushed it open, a mix of tobacco, turpentine, and women's perfume hit his nose, a warm, familial scent, jarringly out of place amid the silence. In the center of the desk, a clay pipe rested on an enamel ashtray, a thin wisp of smoke curling from its bowl. The residual warmth seeped into his fingertips, as if the owner had stepped away only 5 minutes earlier. A logbook lay open at the corner of the desk. The last entry was scrawled almost illegibly, the charcoal sketch of a whirlpool twisting like a living thing, its edges smudged with a faint blue-green phosphorescence similar to deep-sea bioluminescent algae, but brighter, glinting in the morning light. Beneath the logbook, 8 words were circled heavily: "The sea breathes, light lies." The charcoal had torn through the paper, revealing the yellowed fibers underneath. Ellis scanned every corner of the room. A wardrobe in the corner stood open, holding 3 navy blue captains' uniforms embroidered with gold anchors. The cuffs of the bottom one were stained with ship's grease. A dresser drawer hung half open, Anna Briggs' pearl necklace resting in a velvet box beside an ivory comb, a few strands of light brown hair tangled in its teeth. In the small inner cabin, a child's bed was made neatly, a rag doll bear propped beside the pillow, its ear patched with off-white cloth, the stitches uneven, clearly hand-sewn. It was Sophia, Captain Briggs' daughter's toy. "First mate, I found something in the galley." Thomas's voice came from the end of the corridor, sharp with tension. Ellis hurried over. On the oak table in the galley, 4 place settings of silverware were arranged perfectly, knife blades facing the plates, fork tines up, spoons to the right, even the napkins folded into neat triangles. On one plate, half a slice of toast still glistened with butter, its edges slightly crisp, a fried egg sat with its yolk half set, the white a fresh pale yellow. A ceramic bowl held a small portion of oatmeal, its surface crusted over like a painting frozen mid-scene, as if the diners would return any second to pick up their cutlery. 3 ceramic bowls soaked in the sink, their sides dotted with oatmeal residue. Ellis knelt down, his gaze falling on a sticky substance in the tile grout like a chunk of melted jade, glinting with faint phosphorescence in the light. He touched it lightly with his fingertip. It dissolved instantly into a clear liquid, leaving only a cold tingle, like touching deep sea water. I checked the cargo hold, all barrels are intact. Peter ran in, holding a notebook. 2,000 barrels of industrial alcohol, each covered with canvas, latches unbroken, even the seals intact. There's enough fresh water and food for 3 months. This doesn't look like a ship preparing to be abandoned. Ellis stood up and glanced at the galley windows. Every reflective pane was covered with dark canvas, secured tightly with thick hemp rope crudely stitched but firm, letting in no light. Only one north-facing window had a large tear in its canvas, the glass shattered on the floor. No signs of a struggle, though it looked as if someone had smashed it with their hands in a panic. A thread of blue fiber clung to the shards, matching the color of the crew's uniforms. "Check the lifeboats," Ellis said, his voice hoarse. The 3 men ran to the lifeboat davits at the stern. 3 were empty, only the leftmost still held a length of hemp rope, its end cut cleanly, a scrap of blue cloth tangled in it, embroidered with a small B for Briggs. A roll of unused rope lay on the floor beside the davit, damp with seawater clearly used recently. Nowhere on the rope, latches opened on purpose. Thomas knelt to inspect the metal latches. "It's like someone lowered the lifeboat in a hurry, but tried to keep order." Ellis leaned over the rail, staring at the empty davit. The wind lifted his coat, carrying a faint whiff of blue-green phosphorescence, faint, but sharp, pricking at a memory. He suddenly recalled a ghost ship he'd encountered 3 years earlier in the Indian Ocean. Its deck had held similar phosphorescence, though he'd dismissed it then as plankton. "First mate, look at this," Peter pointed at the rail. "There's a small handprint." Ellis walked over. A tiny handprint marked the rail, its fingerprints clear like a child's. Beside it clung a strand of off-white thread matching the patch on the ragdoll bear's ear. In that moment, a thought struck him: no one had taken the crew. They'd left on their own. Captain Briggs, his wife, his daughter, and the crew, driven by a fear more urgent than the deep sea, had boarded the lifeboat and sailed into the empty ocean. That night, as the DeGrasse towed the Mary Celeste back to port, Ellis sat in his cabin and wrote the first entry in his diary about the incident. He sealed the phosphorescent substance in a small dark glass vial, tucking it deep inside the diary, the blue-green flecks on the glass glowing faintly in the dim light, like an unextinguished star. "This was no abandonment," he wrote. "It was a hasty farewell. What haunts that ship isn't a ghost, but the warmth left behind by people in fear. I will find the truth for those who vanished, and for this God-forsaken silence." November 24, 1872. Morning. The sea lay as smooth as polished glass, not a breath of wind stirring. Sophia sat on a crate on the deck, hugging her ragdoll bear. Anna had stayed up late sewing the patch on its ear, the off-white stitches uneven but more reassuring than any jewel. "Daddy, will we see dolphins today?" Her voice was soft as candy floss in the wind, innocent as only a child's can be. I walked over and ruffled her hair. Sunlight gilded the tips of her hair light brown, like Anna's, not my dark brown, which was already streaked with grey. "Maybe," I smiled. "If the dolphins want to visit, I'll take you to the bow to feed them." Sophia clapped her hands, the bear's limbs bouncing with her movements. Anna stood at the rail, hanging freshly washed shirts on the line. The wind lifted her skirt like a white flower. "John, don't spoil her," she looked back at me, smiling. "You promised to tell her a story last night, but you fell asleep halfway through." I scratched my head, embarrassed. I'd been tired lately, plagued by strange dreams filled with blue light, like sea water flooding the cabin, dyeing everything blue. When I inspected the cargo hold that morning, old Sailor Tom followed behind me, tapping the alcohol barrels with a wooden mallet. "Captain, "This cargo's solid safer than the gold I hauled when I was young," he said, his voice nostalgic, wrinkles crinkling around his eyes. Tom had spent 40 years at sea, surviving 3 shipwrecks. The crew called him the sea's favorite. "Caution never hurt anyone," I patted his shoulder. "Cover the barrels tight, weather's unpredictable lately. Don't let seawater seep in." 2,000 oak barrels lined the hold, each stamped with the New York Distillery logo, canvas covers secured tightly with rope. I walked around the hold, no issues, I thought. I had no idea then that these gold-solid barrels would soon spawn the most terrible nightmare. By evening, the sea turned strange. First the wind died, not a ripple left. Then the water began to glow, not the orange of sunset or silver of moonlight, but a pale blue, like shattered glass, creeping up from the ship's hull, spreading across the deck until it wrapped around the entire vessel. Old Tom knelt on the deck, dipped his finger in the water, sniffed it, then licked it. He frowned. "Captain, this water's sweet, like honey was added." I knelt too, touching the water. It was cold, but held a strange warmth, like touching something alive. Tiny lights flickered in the glow, like countless transparent insects dancing on the surface, or stars fallen into the sea, swaying with the waves. Anna suddenly grabbed my arm, her voice tight. "John, look at the light." I looked up. The blue glow had woven a net around the Mary Celeste, trapping her. The lights grew denser, merging into flowing ribbons that crawled up the masts, as if to swallow the ship whole. Then the ship seemed to sway, not from waves, but a bone-deep dizziness. The light twisted, the mast's shadow warping into strange shapes, like human arms or tangling seaweed. "Daddy, the bear's eyes are glowing," Sophia's voice came suddenly. I turned. The ragdoll bear in her arms had faint blue lights in its eye sockets, like tiny sapphires. Its mouth seemed to curl upward in a strange smile. My heart sank. Spring 1884. London. Ellis sat in his office at the Maritime Insurance Investigation Bureau, his fingers unconsciously brushing the small vial in his drawer. 10 years had passed, and the blue-green flecks on the glass still glowed faintly, stubbornly like a dying ember. Outside, London's fog was thick, blurring carriages and pedestrians into shadows, just like the Atlantic fog 10 years earlier. The nautical map on the wall was covered in red circles. The Mary Celeste's coordinates 38°20 N, 17°15 W were circled in bright red, with notes scrawled beside them. 1873, search teams found no lifeboat wreckage. 1875, fishermen found cloth marked B near Bermuda. 1880, Mary Celeste's bell donated to New York Museum, blue-green stains on surface. Over the years, he'd collected every scrap of information he could find, but never the key to unlocking the mystery. "Mr. Croft, the Bureau rejected your application again," his assistant Lucy walked in with a cup of coffee, her tone sympathetic. "The director says the Mary Celeste is an unexplainable supernatural case. Continuing the investigation would just waste time and funds." Ellis took the coffee. The warmth seeped through the porcelain, but couldn't reach the cold in his chest. "Supernatural." He held up the vial, shaking it in the foggy light. The flecks swirled like trapped fog. "A perfectly intact ship, a missing crew. How is that supernatural? We just haven't found the key yet." Lucy sighed and set a file on the desk. "This is the missing report for the Atlantic. The owner suspects the captain intentionally sank her for insurance fraud. The director wants you to prioritize this." Ellis glanced at the file. The owner's signature was flamboyant, the lines filled with impatience. He pushed it aside, his gaze returning to the map. The scene from 10 years ago flashed before him: the Mary Celeste's deck, the pipe in the captain's cabin, the half-eaten breakfast in the galley, the phosphorescent substance by the sink. Details etched into his mind, haunting him day and night. That afternoon, Ellis submitted his resignation. Packing his things, he stuffed all his Mary Celeste materials into a leather suitcase, an old nautical chart marked Enchanted Maelstrom, found 3 years earlier in an antique shop in Lisbon, its edges yellowed, inscribed in Portuguese, "Dangerous waters light deceives," a copy of the crew list, Captain Briggs, 42, Anna Briggs, 38, Sophia Briggs, 6, 10 crewmen, including Old Tom, 58, and young sailor Jimmy, 22, and his annotated diary. When he walked out of the bureau, London's fog had grown thicker. Ellis stood on the street with his suitcase, suddenly feeling like the Mary Celeste herself carrying a ship full of obsession, sailing into the unknown. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to find the truth for Captain Briggs, for the little girl with the ragdoll bear, and for the cold dread he'd felt on that deck 10 years earlier. Over the next 2 years, Ellis traveled to laboratories and universities across Europe. In Berlin, he met the famous marine biologist Professor Heinrich. The professor took one look at the vial and shook his head. "This is just ordinary plankton residue common in the North Atlantic. Don't be fooled by ghost ship tales, young man. Science needs evidence, not fantasy." In Amsterdam, he met Dr. Vanderson, an optics researcher. The doctor analyzed the phosphorescent substance with a spectroscope, only to conclude, trace amounts of methane. No unusual frequency impossible to affect human brains. The hallucinations you describe are more likely mass poisoning or a mirage. Each dead end only made Ellis more determined. He pored over his suitcase of materials again and again until April 1884, when he found a paper titled Preliminary Study of Deep-Sea Bioluminescent Organisms in the Library of the University of Paris. Its author was Evelyn Reed, and at the end, deep-sea protists exist that emit a unique light, whose frequency reacts with organic matter to affect mammalian nervous systems. The paper was dated 1882, with a red note scrawled beside it, "Rejected insufficient evidence." Ellis took the paper and went to Evelyn's laboratory, following the address. It was on the top floor of an old apartment building, the stairwell cluttered with junk, lime peeling from the walls. He knocked 3 times before the door opened. The woman who answered wore a white lab coat stained with chemicals, her hair tied back with a pencil. Her eyes behind her glasses were bloodshot, but bright as lit alcohol lamps. "Who are you?" she asked, tired but wary. "My name is Ellis Croft." He held up the paper. "I read your research on deep-sea bioluminescent organisms. I have something I want you to see." Evelyn hesitated, then let him in. The lab was dim, reagent bottles glowing coldly. The walls were covered with nautical charts and specimens, dominated by a large sketch of deep-sea creatures, countless translucent organisms, glowing blue-green inside. Exactly like the phosphorescent substance Ellis had seen on the Mary Celeste. "You've seen these too?" Ellis' voice trembled. Evelyn took the vial, her fingers pausing, then her eyes lit up. She hurried to a microscope, carefully pouring a drop of the substance onto a slide, adding a drop of saline, and adjusting the focus. "Look!" Ellis leaned in, his breath catching. Countless translucent organisms squirmed on the slide oval, no bigger than a pinhead, with blue-green cores inside, like crushed stars. When Evelyn added a drop of alcohol, they grew frantic, their cores brightening, merging into flowing light ribbons that wove a net in the viewfinder. Exactly as Ellis had imagined it 10 years earlier on the Mary Celeste. "I call them glimmer worms," Evelyn said, her voice excited, her fingers shaking slightly. "I found them 2 years ago in a 2,000 meter deep trench sample from the North Atlantic. They feed on deep-sea methane, their spores rise to the surface with methane bubbles. When they encounter volatile organics like alcohol or ether, they emit a unique light invisible to the naked eye, but it enters the human brain through the retina, stimulating the amygdala, digging up deepest fears." She pointed at the light ribbons under the microscope. "See? Their frequency matches the brain's fear wave frequency perfectly. When the light touches the brain, it amplifies fear 10-fold, 20-fold, making hallucinations feel real." Ellis stood up suddenly, knocking over a reagent bottle. Purple liquid spilled, glowing briefly blue before fading. He thought of the logbook's light lies, of the covered windows, they'd tried to block the light, of the shattered glass, someone had seen danger outside in their hallucination, of the small handprint on the davit, Sophia, terrified, clinging to the rail. "I know why they abandoned the ship," he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes burning. "They saw their worst fears." The light turned fear into reality. Captain Briggs wasn't cowardly, he was trying to protect his family. Evelyn looked at him, her expression softening. "You've been chasing this for a long time, haven't you?" Ellis nodded, taking his diary from the suitcase and opening it to the first page. 10 years. I kept wondering what would make a crew abandon a sound ship for a lifeboat in the open sea. Now I know fear. Those damn lights. But we need evidence." Evelyn walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick lab notebook. "I tried experiments with mice, injecting them with glimmer worm spores and alcohol. They showed fear responses, fleeing frantically, attacking each other. But the university called my work unscientific, confiscated my equipment, and rejected my paper." Her voice held frustration, but also resolve. "If we can find the enchanted maelstrom, see the glimmerworm's light with our own eyes, collect enough samples, we can prove this. Not just solve the Mary Celeste mystery, but warn others about these organisms, prevent more tragedies." Ellis looked at her, a weight lifting from his chest. He held out his hand. "Then let's go together. I have a chart, know the general location. We'll find the evidence for those who vanished, and for your research." Evelyn took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but strong. "Good. Together." November 25, 1872. Early morning. I was woken by Tom's scream. It sounded like a seagull with its throat crushed sharp, desperate, cutting through the night's silence. I grabbed my coat, ran to the deck without shoes, only one thought in my mind: something's wrong. Rushing onto the deck, I saw Tom clinging to the rail, vomiting violently, bile spilling out. His face was as white as paper, his finger pointing at the sea, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Captain! Something's in the water. Black, so many tentacles. They're climbing. Gonna climb up." I followed his finger. In the blue glow of the sea, huge dark shapes moved like octopus tentacles, or tangling seaweed, thick enough to wrap around a mast, creeping toward the ship. Their suction cups were visible, glistening wet, as if they'd grab the rail and drag the ship under any second. "Tom, calm down." I grabbed his shoulders, shaking him hard. "It's a hallucination. The light's tricking you." But he wouldn't listen, staring fixedly at the sea, muttering over and over, "Tentacles, so many tentacles, same as before." I suddenly remembered 5 years earlier, Tom had survived a shipwreck, his vessel attacked by a giant octopus. He was the only survivor. It was his worst fear, and now, the light had turned it into reality. Anna ran over, holding Sophia. Our daughter's face was buried in her chest, her body shaking like a leaf in autumn. The ragdoll bear lay on the deck, its patched ear flapping in the wind, the blue glow in its eyes brighter. "John, we have to leave." Anna's voice shook, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The light. I see the sails on fire. People screaming in the flames, saying they'll burn to death." I looked at the mainsail. It hung perfectly from the mast, no fire, no smoke, not even a scorch mark. But Anna's fear was so real, as if she truly saw flames. I touched her forehead. "No fever." She was awake, but trapped in a hallucination. "Where's Jimmy?" I suddenly thought of the young sailor, only 22, his first voyage. In the crew's quarters," Anna pointed down the corridor. "He says he sees his mother. Crying, wanting to go home." I ran to the crew's quarters, pushing the door open. Jimmy huddled in the corner, hugging a crate, yelling "Mom," and "I'm sorry." His face was wet with tears, his eyes unfocused as if he saw his mother, far away in his hometown. The other crewmen were in chaos, some smashing doors, shouting they're locked. We'll be trapped, some throwing things overboard, yelling throw them over. The tentacles won't come, others squatting, heads in hands, silent but trembling. I understood then, the light was fake, but the fear was real. Everyone saw their worst fear in the light. Tom saw tentacles, Anna saw fire, Jimmy saw his mother, he'd fought with her before leaving, always regretted it. And I saw Sophia's ragdoll bear, its eyes glowing blue, crawling toward her. Old Sailor Pete suddenly grabbed an axe, swinging it at the rail. The axe thudded into the teak. Lower the lifeboats. We'll die if we stay. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair wild, like a rabid animal. Tentacles are wrapped around the hull. We'll all die. I tried to stop him, but my hands were shaking too. When I looked down, I thought I saw blue light on Sophia's skirt like something crawling. My daughter's cry came, "Daddy, the bear's following me, gonna catch me." In that moment, I made my decision. I told Anna to take Sophia to the lifeboat first. Pete and Tom would untie the ropes, Jimmy and the others would gather water and food. Everyone moved in a hurry, but tried to stay orderly. We were sailors, even in fear, we remembered how to handle a lifeboat. As the canvas billowed in the wind, I took one last look at the Mary Celeste. The blue light still flowed across her deck, like a gentle funeral. The mainsail glowed blue-green in the light, the bell hanging still from the mast. The oatmeal in the galley still crusted over. Sophia's ragdoll bear lay on the deck, the blue glow in its eyes fading. I thought I was saving them. I didn't know I was pushing them into another abyss. November 1884. Enchanted Maelstrom Waters. The research vessel Explorer cruised slowly, her hull swaying gently with the waves. Ellis stood on the deck, holding a pair of dark goggles Evelyn had given him, lenses polished from special obsidian, filtering out the glimmerworm's unique light. Methane levels 3 times normal. Glimmerworm spores active, Evelyn said beside him, holding a brass methane detector, its needle jumping wildly. We're getting closer to the enchanted maelstrom. Be careful, the light could appear anytime. Ellis nodded, gazing at the distant sea. Like 10 years earlier, it was unnaturally calm, no wind stirring. Sunlight fell on the water, but seemed dim, as if filtered through gauze. Tiny bubbles floated on the surface, glowing faintly blue-green like countless small eyes, watching the explorer. Look there, Evelyn suddenly pointed to the left. Ellis followed her finger. A thin, mother-of-pearl fog spread across the water, translucent, filled with blue-green lights, drifting closer. The lights grew denser, merging into flowing ribbons that twisted together, weaving a huge net, descending toward the explorer. Glimmerworm spores form fog when they hit air. Evelyn opened her notebook, scribbling notes. Alcohol vapor accelerates their activity. We need to put out all alcohol lamps, avoid stimulating more light. The crew moved quickly, extinguishing lamps and covering all reflective surfaces on deck with black cloth. Ellis put on the goggles, but left a small gap he needed to see, to witness the light that had terrified the Mary Celeste's crew. When the fog approached, Ellis stopped breathing. Through the gap, he saw the deck filled with people, crewmen in blue uniforms, a little girl with a ragdoll bear, a woman in a white dress, and a tall man bending to untie a lifeboat's ropes. The man's profile was clear: Captain Briggs. His brow furrowed, his eyes anxious but determined, as if making a painful choice. "Daddy, wait for me," the little girl's voice cut through the fog, a needle to Ellis' heart. It was Sophia, her bear fallen on the deck. She bent to pick it up, but her mother pulled her hand. Anna's face was wet with tears, but she forced a smile, comforting her. "Sophia, be good. We'll be back soon. Daddy will protect us." Old Tom stood beside the lifeboat, axe in hand, watching the sea warily as if he truly saw tentacles. Jimmy hugged a crate, yelling "Mom," but calmed himself at Briggs' glance, helping with the ropes. It was too real, like a movie frozen in time, replaying in the fog. Ellis could see the ship's grease on Briggs' cuffs, oatmeal residue on Anna's skirt, a drop of seawater on Sophia's hair, details matching exactly what he'd seen on the Mary Celeste 10 years earlier. Suddenly, another image flashed before him, London's fog, his mother waving, yelling "Ellis, hide! The light's chasing me!" It was 10 years earlier his mother had been committed to an asylum for madness, muttering "the light's chasing me" before leaving. He'd thought it nonsense then. Now he understood she'd likely encountered the same light, trapped in a hallucination. "Ellis! Stop staring at the fog!" Evelyn's voice snapped him back. She pushed his goggles closed, sealing the gap. "That light's a hallucination. It'll trap you." Ellis gasped, realizing his hands were white-knuckled on the rail, his palms sweating. He breathed heavily, his heart racing. The hallucination had felt so real, as if he stood on the Mary Celeste's deck, watching Briggs lead his family and crew to abandoned ship. "What did you see?" Evelyn handed him a glass of water, concerned. Ellis drank, calming down. "Captain Briggs. His family, the crew. Abandoning the ship. Scared, but trying to stay orderly. Briggs wasn't cowardly. Fatherly love drove him to the edge." He looked at Evelyn, his eyes burning. "My mother. 10 years ago, she said the light's chasing me. I thought she was crazy. Now I know she probably saw the glimmer worm's light, trapped in a hallucination. I finally understand that fear." Evelyn patted his shoulder, saying nothing. The fog still swirled around the deck, light ribbons coiling around the masts like blue snakes. The detector's needle still jumped, methane rising, glimmer worm spores growing denser. "We need to collect samples." Evelyn took a sealed glass jar from the lab. "Use this to capture fog air contains glimmer worm spores. And seawater samples, to analyze their habitat." Ellis took the jar, carefully opening it and holding it toward the fog. The moment the fog touched the jar, its walls were covered in blue-green lights like fireflies, dancing inside. He sealed it quickly. Key evidence of the glimmer worm's existence, the key to solving the Mary Celeste mystery. For hours, they collected samples, fog air, seawater, even a few live glimmer worms caught in a net. Evelyn worked in the lab, examining the worms under the microscope, recording their light frequency. Ellis stood on the deck, watching the fog fade, the sea calm again as if it had all been a dream. Samples analyzed, Evelyn walked out with a report, excited. "Glimmer worm light frequency matches human fear waves. And with alcohol vapor, it triples. Our theory's correct. The Mary Celeste crew abandoned ship because they were trapped in hallucinations from this light." Ellis took the report, looking at the data and charts. But he felt no excitement, only heaviness. He thought of Briggs' diary, Sophia's bear, his mother's words. This light had taken too many lives, left too many regrets. "Should we publish the truth?" Evelyn suddenly asked. Ellis froze. Publishing would solve the Mary Celeste mystery, validate Evelyn's research, even prevent more people from falling victim to the glimmer worms. But he thought of the crew's families, of Briggs' love. How would people see them? Cowards driven mad by hallucinations, or heroes clinging to duty in fear? He thought of the greedy. If they knew about glimmer worms, would they capture them, make hallucinogens or weapons? More tragedies. No, Ellis decided. This truth belongs to those who vanished, to the deep sea. We are the only ones who know, and we should be the last. Evelyn looked at him, silent for a moment, then nodded. "Okay. I'll follow your lead." That night, they sealed all samples and reports in the ship's safe. Evelyn took down her glimmer worm sketch, folding it into a drawer. These things would stay secret forever, sleeping with the Mary Celeste in the Atlantic depths. November 25, 1872. Morning. The lifeboat tossed in the sea, like a leaf, ready to capsize. Sophia lay asleep in Anna's arms, her little face furrowed, as if dreaming badly. She clutched the ragdoll bear tightly, its patched ear wet with her tears. Anna looked pale too, leaning against the lifeboat's edge, eyes closed, lips white. I gripped the oars, rowing hard. The blue sea light had begun to fade, like sugar dissolved in water, disappearing into the distance. The fog lifted, sunlight gilding the waves, everything eerily normal. No tentacles, no fire, no blue glow from the bear. Only empty sea and a tossing lifeboat. "Captain, the lights, gone," Tom's voice trembled. He stared at the distant Mary Celeste, confused. "Did we make a mistake?" I followed his gaze. The Mary Celeste still floated there, like a lonely island. Her mainsail glowed white in the sun, the bell's shadow on the deck. No smoke from the galley chimney. Sophia's bear still lay on the deck, a forgotten toy. My heart felt squeezed, sharp with pain. I realized then we'd abandoned not a ship under tentacle attack, but our only chance to survive. The lifeboat held 5 days' worth of water, even less food. In this sea, we wouldn't last long. Anna's arms around Sophia tightened, tears dropping on the bear's patch, a soft plink. "John, did we make a mistake?" I said nothing. The wind carried the Mary Celeste's shadow far away, like a dream. I thought of Sophia asking Daddy, "When will we go home?" before we left, of Anna fixing my uniform at the dock, saying, "Come back soon, I'll make your favorite apple pie," of Tom patting my shoulder, saying, "Captain, we trust you." But now, I'd brought them here to empty sea, fleeing a hallucination, maybe dooming them to death. Jimmy suddenly cried, hugging the crate, yelling, "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have fought with you." The other crewmen fell silent, some staring at their feet, some at the horizon, eyes empty with despair. I gripped the oars tighter, rowing on. I was their captain, husband, father. Even if death waited ahead, I'd lead them toward hope. The last page of the diary was scrawled almost illegibly, ink blurred with seawater and tears, a blue stain spreading. "The light lies. Fear lies. But my love for them is real. If I could be reborn, I'd tell Sophia another sea story, eat Anna's apple pie again, drink rum with the crew on the deck one more time." A fleck of blue-green phosphorescence clung to the page's edge like a frozen tear, glowing faintly in the sun. Outside London. Old Ellis sat in his study. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling on the diary on his desk. Captain Briggs' diary, found the previous year in an antique shop. The shopkeeper, an old man with white hair, had held the diary and sighed. "It belonged to my grandfather. He worked in the shipyard where the Mary Celeste was built. Captain Briggs gave him this diary before sailing, saying, 'If I don't return, give it to my family.' But his family never appeared. The diary stayed in our family, passed down 3 generations." Ellis' fingers had trembled when he took it. The diary's cover was dark brown leather, worn thin, paper fibers showing at the edges. The signature John Briggs on the title page had faded, beside a crudely drawn ragdoll bear, its ear patched with off-white cloth, exactly like the one Ellis had seen on the Mary Celeste 10 years earlier. Over the years, Ellis and Evelyn had never mentioned glimmerworms again, never returned to the enchanted maelstrom. Evelyn had gone back to Paris, continuing her marine biology research, but never published another paper on glimmerworms. Ellis had bought a small house by the sea outside London. Every morning, he sat by the window, watching waves hit the shore as if listening to a silent farewell. He picked up a pen, writing the final entry in a new notebook. Those glimmers were no curse, they were an invitation from the deep. They showed how fragile human minds are. A little light, and fear becomes a cage. But they also showed how noble humanity is even at the edge of madness. Fatherly love builds a monument. Captain Briggs was no coward. He was a hero, one who chose to protect his family, even in fear. Waves lapped the shore outside, a gentle farewell. Ellis locked both diaries in a drawer, beside the empty small vial, its blue-green flecks long gone, but like a seed, rooted in his heart. He finally understood some truths didn't need the world to know. Just as the Mary Celeste would forever remain in the 1872 morning light, Briggs' love would forever stay in that blue-lit dawn, a gentle stubbornness, human in the face of fear. Sea wind blew through the window, carrying faint salt. Ellis thought he saw the blue-green light again, weaving a net on the sea, not a terrifying trap, but a silent tribute to all souls who chose to protect, even in fragility. As the sun set, Ellis closed the study window. A small boat sailed toward the harbor in the distance, crewmen on deck waving to the shore, hopeful, like the Mary Celeste when she first set sail. Ellis smiled. The vanished, the souls trapped by light, they could finally rest. And he would carry this secret, until his last breath.